3 women are sitting in a cafe talking about their husbands. My husband is a miner, says Heather. I like being in bed with him because he has an incredible shaft. Mine is a dentist, says Linda. I like being in bed with him because no one can drill like he can. You're both lucky, says Martha. My husband's a mailman. What's wrong with that? Asks Heather. Well, says Martha, he always delivers late, and half the time it's in the wrong slot. A boy read a restaurant sign that advertised fat-free French fries. Sounds great, said the health-conscious boy. He ordered some. He watched as the cook pulled a basket of fries from the fryer. The potatoes were dripping with oil when the cook put them into the container. Wait a minute, the boy said. Those don't look fat-free. Sure they are, the cook said. We charge only for the potatoes. The fat is free. Cut out. A middle-aged couple have just finished having lunch together in the kitchen. The husband, now feeling the heaviness of his meal, heads straight for the couch. Just as he's about to lie down, his wife's voice cuts through the air like a whip. Oh, no, you don't, she barks from the kitchen doorway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The lawn looks like a jungle out there. Get off your lazy butt and mow the lawn. The husband, already half in a daze from the food and the thought of a nap, snaps back. Just give me 20 minutes. I'll get to it after my nap. The husband stubbornly eases himself down on the couch, his body sinking into the cushions. He kicks off his shoes, removes his glasses, and places them on the coffee table with a sigh of exaggerated relief. The wife knows that 20 minutes really means 2 hours, and when he wakes up, he will just have another excuse not to mow the lawn. So, she decides to take another approach. You know, honey, she begins, her voice no longer sharp but gentle. Without your glasses, you look just like the same handsome young man I married all those years ago. Well, says the husband, still desperate to get some shut-eye. Without my glasses. You still look pretty good, too. 2 engineers were standing at the base of a flagpole, looking at its top. A woman walked by and asked what they were doing. We're supposed to find the height of this flagpole, said Sven, but we don't have a ladder. The woman took a wrench from her purse, loosened a couple of bolts, and laid the pole down on the ground. Then she took a tape measure from her pocketbook, took a measurement, and announced, 21 feet, 6 inches, and walked away. One engineer shook his head and laughed. A lot of good that does us. We ask for the height, and she gives us the length. Both engineers have since quit their engineering jobs and are currently serving as elected members of Parliament. A guy is driving in a sparsely populated part of the country alone at night in a pouring rain. All of a sudden, the car starts to veer slightly to one side. He pulls off, gets out, inspects the car. Flat wheel. He dons a poncho, starts taking the equipment out of the trunk. Wheel, triangle, wrench, jack. No jack. He takes the manual out of the gloves compartment to check. The jack is supposed to be in the trunk along with the rest of the kit, but there's no sign of it. What to do? The guy remembers he saw some houses along the road, a mile or so up the road. He starts waking in that direction. What a night to get a flat. Why is it always me? Walk, walk, walk. I bet by the time I get back, my car will have been stolen. Walk, walk. Probably they aren't even at home. Walk, walk. No, scratch that. Miss, they will be at home. They just won't open the door. Why should they? Walk, walk. After all, who's dumb enough to be around at his time of the night in this weather? A serial killer, probably. At long last, he reached the group of houses. Seeing how the lights were still on in the upper floor, he rang the bell on the Fisser T1. A dog from inside the house started barking to wake the dead. There. Just my luck. If Fido doesn't chew me open a new one, the owner surely will. Getting people off the bed at this hour, will you, for a carjack? Listen, buddy, do I look like a mechanic? Why don't you go buying stuff in shops at daytime just like everyone else? Doors banging and human voices joined the barks. Tired, soaked, and worried, the man stood waiting on the doorsteps. Bet he's gone to take out the blunderbuss. I'll probably get shot right in the face. Well, officer, he did ask me for a car, Jack, but I thought it was just a dumb excuse. Whoever needs a jack when all cars come with one? Finally, the door opened. A frowning man peered out and cautiously said, "Good evening." "How? Oh, well, you know what? You can go to hell and take your car jack right with you." A slow-witted man walked into a patent office. He walked up to the patent officer and said, "Hey, I've got a new idea for a mousetrap. Draw a box on the blackboard." "Here's the box." "Draw a hole in the box." "Here's the hole." "Draw a circle in the bottom of the hole." "Here's the cheese." "Draw a line across the hole in the box." "Here's the blade." The mouse sticks his head in the hole to get the cheese. The blade drops on his neck and kills him. The patent officer looks at the diagram. He understands that the man is a little slow, so he wants to be kind. He explains to the man that he does not think the design is ready to be patented yet. He tells the man, "Please work on it some more. Perhaps I will be able to patent it another time." The slow-witted man says, "Thank you," and leaves the office. 1 week later, the slow-witted man shows up again. Draw the exact same example on the board in exactly the same way. The slow-witted man says, "This is the box, this is the hole, this is the cheese, and this is the wire." The mouse sticks his head in the hole to get the cheese, the wire wraps around his neck and kills him. The patent officer, still trying to be kind, makes the same excuse as before. The slow-witted man leaves. 1 week later, the slow-witted man returns. He approaches the same patent officer and says the exact same things. "Here's the box. Here's the hole." This time he draws a zigzag line across the hole, and he does not draw a circle for the cheese. After completing the zigzag line, the slow-witted man proclaims, "And here's the saw blade." The patent officer notices the design and the fact that there is no cheese. He asks the slow-witted man, "Where's the cheese?" "Aha," says the slow-witted man. "That's the point. The mouse sticks his head in the hole and says, 'Where did you put the cheese?' When the mouse speaks, you must act like the mouse. Stick your head out as if looking into the trap and swing it back and forth as if looking for the cheese." The implication is that the mouse will saws off his own head while looking for the cheese. Remember the saw blade? An insurance salesman is visiting a remote farmstead. He parks at the foot of the driveway and walks up to the house to find an old Labrador lying on the porch. As he tries to step over it, it speaks. "Watch where you're stepping, buddy." The salesman almost faints with shock. "You can talk." "Yeah, sure," says the dog. "I've made a pretty good career out of it." Intrigued, the salesman asks to hear more. "Well," says the dog, "it all began back in 801. My owner found out about this gift I had and turned me into a traveling sideshow. Course, all I had to do was do simple skits, a few words, a couple of jokes. It was pretty beneath me, but it paid well. Anyway, I was spotted by some government types and got recruited by the CIA. They taught me to speak Russian, and I was infiltrated into secret bases all over the Soviet Union. I mean, who's going to suspect a dog, right? I was the most effective source of intelligence throughout the entire Cold War. I can't tell you how many times I saved the world with my timely intelligence. The salesman is practically bursting at this. Just then, the farmer emerges from the farmhouse. "How much do you want for this incredible dog?" yells the salesman. "I'll pay any price." The farmer spits. "Y'all can have him for nothing." The salesman is even more flabbergasted. "How can you give away such an incredible animal, a talking dog with such an amazing story?" The farmer laughs, 'cause he's a damn liar. He never did any of that stuff. A prince was put under a spell so that he could speak only one word each year. If he didn't speak for 2 years, the following year he could speak 2 words, and so on. One day, he fell in love with a beautiful lady. He refrained from speaking for 2 whole years so he could call her my darling. But then he wanted to tell her he loved her, so he waited 3 more years. At the end of these 5 years, he wanted to ask her to marry him, so he waited another 4 years. Finally, as the 9th year of silence ended, he led the lady to the most romantic place in the kingdom and said, "My darling, I love you. Will you marry me?" And the lady said, "Pardon?" One day at the end of class, little Johnny's teacher asks the class to go home and think of a story to be concluded with the moral of that story. The following day, the teacher asks for the first volunteer to tell their story. Little Susie raises her hand. "My dad owns a farm, and every Sunday we load the chicken eggs on the truck and drive into town to sell them at the market. Well, one Sunday we hit a big bump and all the eggs flew out of the basket and onto the road." When the teacher asked for the moral of the story, Susie replied, "Don't keep all your eggs in one basket." Little Lucy went next. "My dad owns a farm too. Every weekend we take the chicken eggs and put them in the incubator. Last weekend only 8 of the 12 eggs hatched." Again, the teacher asked for the moral of the story. Lucy replied, "Don't count your chickens before they hatch." Next up was little Johnny. "My Uncle Ted fought in the Vietnam War and his plane was shot down over enemy territory. He jumped out before it crashed, but could only take a case of beer, a machine gun, and a machete. On the way down, he drank the case of beer, then he landed right in the middle of 100 Vietnamese soldiers. He shot 70 with his machine gun, but then he ran out of bullets. So he pulled out his machete and killed 20 more. Then the blade on his machete broke, so he killed the last 10 with his bare hands." The teacher looked a little shocked. After clearing her throat, she asked what possible moral there could be to this story. "Well," Johnny replied, "don't mess with Uncle Ted when he's been drinking." Patty had a job as a postman, and one Monday morning he was riding through the neighborhood on his usual route, delivering the mail. As he approached one of the homes, he noticed that, strangely, both cars were still in the driveway. His wonder was cut short by Murphy, the homeowner, coming out with a load of empty beer, wine, and spirit bottles for the recycling bin. "Jesus, Murphy, it looks like you lot had one of a party last night," the postman commented. Murphy, in obvious pain, replied, "Actually, we had it Saturday night. This is the first time I have felt like moving since 4:00 Sunday morning. We had about 15 couples from around the neighborhood over for some weekend fun, and it got a bit wild. We all got so drunk around midnight that we started playing Who Am I? The postman thought for a moment and said, "How the hell do you play Who Am I?" "Well, all the men go in the bedroom and come out one at a time covered with a sheet with only the showing through a hole in the sheet. Then the women try to guess who it is." The postman laughed and said, "Pooh, pooh, that sounds like fun. I'm sorry I missed it." "Probably a good thing you did, Pad," Murphy responded. "Your feckin' name came up 7 times. Sean and Patrick were best friends from childhood. During one particular night of revelry, the two agreed that when one passed on, the other would take and spill the contents of a bottle of fine Irish whiskey over the grave of the fondly missed and recently dead friend, and as fate would have it, Sean would be the first to pass. Pat, hearing of his friend's illness, came to visit his dear friend one last time. "Sean," said Pat, "can you hear me?" Faintly, Sean replied, "Aye, Patty, I can." Bashfully, Pat started, "Do you remember our pact, Sean?" "Yes, I do, Patty," Sean strained. And you'll also remember that I was to pour the contents of a fine old bottle of whiskey over your grave, which we have been saving for, going on 30 years now, said Pat. "Ah, Patty, that I do," whispered Sean. "It's a very old bottle now, you know," urged Pat. "And what are you getting at, Pat?" asked Sean briskly. "Well, Sean, when I pour the whiskey over your grave, would you mind if I were to filter it through my kidneys first?" Yoda and Luke are walking through the swamp. Part of their usual training course involves shimmying along a cliff ledge, but today, there's a long break in the ledge they can't cross. "Something for this I have," Yoda says. He reaches into his bag and takes out a bunch of regular dinner table forks and a roll of duct tape. He tapes several forks together to make a bridge and lays it down, allowing the two of them to get across. When they get back to Yoda's hovel, they find that some creature has chewed a hole in the fence around Yoda's garden. "Something I have for this," Yoda says again. Once again, he takes a bunch of forks out of his bag and, using duct tape, tapes them in to patch the hole. Yoda and Luke return to Yoda's home, where Yoda looks through his bag. He's used all his forks but one, he discovers. "That's okay, Master," Luke says, wanting to be helpful. "I'll write us a note reminding us to buy more." So he writes the note and uses the very last fork to pin it to the bulletin board. He looks down at Yoda expecting pride, but instead finds a look of horror. "Master Yoda," he asks, "what did I do wrong?" Yoda replies sagely, "A Jedi uses the forks for no ledge in the fence, never for attack." A man gets shipwrecked on a small island. After a few days wandering, he comes across a tribe of natives who have just lost their chieftain. The tribe's high priest tells the man that as he is the first outsider they have seen in 20 years, he must take 3 tests. If he passes all 3 tests, the tribe will accept him as their new chief. "Fair enough," says the man. "Just let me know what the tests are, and I'll get right on them." The priest takes him to a clearing with 3 straw huts in it, turns to the man, and explains the tests. "In the first hut, you'll find 20 gallons of our native beer. You must drink all of this to complete this test. In the second hut is a gorilla with a sore tooth. You must pull his tooth and survive to pass this test. In the third hut is the ex-chieftain's daughter. You must make love to her until she can take no more." The man agrees and begins the first test. 3 hours later, he walks out of the hut unsteadily and goes toward the second hut. The priest asks if he would like to have a rest, but the man says he wants to get all the tests done before he sleeps and enters the second hut. After 2 hours, he comes out covered from head to toe in blood and scratches and turns to the priest. "Now lead me to the girl with the sore tooth,"